There are moments in life that split everything into two halves, before and after. I never believed I would have one of those moments at 67 years old, sitting at my own dining table, in my own home, holding a fork I had used to cook a meal that nobody thanked me for. But that is exactly where my story begins, not with fireworks or some grand revelation. It began with a shout. My son Nathan's voice cut through the warm air of that kitchen like a blade, not quiet, not measured, not even slightly restrained. He said, "Mom, either you give Vivian this room or you start packing. Your choice." He said it loudly. He said it in front of everyone, and then he sat back down and picked up his fork as if he had just commented on the weather. My name is Rosalind Thorne. I go by Rosa. I am 67 years old. I have spent the better part of my adult life building a home, raising a child, managing a household, working as a freelance bookkeeper to keep everything afloat after my husband Gerald passed, and quietly erasing myself from every equation that involved my own comfort. I am not the kind of woman who makes a scene. I am the kind of woman who holds everything together until she cannot anymore. And on that particular Tuesday evening, something inside me did not break the way I expected it to. It did something much quieter and far more powerful. It decided, let me back up a little, because you need to understand the full picture before you understand what I did next. Nathan moved back into my house 8 months before that dinner. He and Vivian had been renting an apartment across the city, a nice apartment in a building with a doorman and a rooftop terrace, and from the outside, their life looked polished and complete. But then Nathan lost his management position at a logistics firm, and suddenly things were not quite so polished anymore. Vivian worked part-time as a fitness instructor and had no interest in working full-time, so they came to me. I want to be clear about something. I did not mind helping. I genuinely did not. When Nathan stood at my door with 2 large duffel bags and that expression he had worn since he was a teenager whenever something had gone wrong, I felt the pull that every mother feels, that wordless biological pull that says, "This is my child. Open the door." So I opened the door. A large sunny room with a private bathroom and a view of the backyard garden I had spent 15 years cultivating. I cooked for them. I adjusted my schedule around theirs. I stopped inviting my friends over because Vivian said the noise bothered her when she was trying to rest before her morning classes. I stopped watching the television programs I enjoyed in the evenings because Nathan liked to use the living room for his video calls. I reorganized my office space to fit an extra chair for Vivian's laptop because she needed more room to work. And I did all of this without a single complaint because I told myself it was temporary. 8 months passed. Nothing was temporary. Vivian had begun calling me by my first name within 2 weeks of moving in, which I would have been perfectly fine with if the tone had been warm. It was the tone you use with someone who works for you. "Rosalind, we're out of coffee." "Rosalind, the towels in our bathroom need to be replaced." "Rosalind, can you pick up dry cleaning on Thursday because Nathan and I will be busy?" She never said please. She almost never said thank you. And Nathan, my son who I had held and rocked and sacrificed every good year of my 40s and 50s for, he just let it happen. I want to be honest, I let it happen too. Then came the Thursday afternoon when I overheard a conversation I was not supposed to hear. I had come home early from my monthly appointment with my accountant. The house was supposedly empty. Nathan was supposed to be at a job interview, and Vivian had a class to teach. But when I stepped through the front door, I could hear Vivian's voice from the kitchen, clipped and deliberate, speaking into her phone. "She's never going to say anything. You know what she's like. She just absorbs it. I honestly think she doesn't even realize we're doing it. She thinks this is what mothers are supposed to do." A pause, then a laugh. "No, I'm serious. Last week she paid for Nathan's car insurance without even being asked. He just mentioned it casually over breakfast, and by that afternoon she had already transferred the money. I'm telling you, we just have to be patient. If we play this right, we might not need to worry about housing at all for a very long time." I stood in the entryway with my keys in my hand, and my heart doing something strange and slow in my chest. I could have walked in. I could have confronted her right then, but I didn't. Something made me stay very still and very quiet, and I just listened. And what I heard in those 5 minutes changed something fundamental in the way I saw the situation I was living in. When Vivian finally hung up, I heard her hum to herself, open the refrigerator, and pour a glass of juice. I quietly stepped back out through the front door and sat on the porch steps for 15 minutes, just breathing. After that, I started paying attention in a different way. I began noticing things I had explained away before, like the fact that Nathan had borrowed my car twice for emergencies, and both times the fuel gauge had come back nearly empty. Like the fact that Vivian had started using my personal skincare products without asking, and had replaced my expensive face cream with a cheaper version and put it back in the same spot, hoping I would not notice. Like the fact that every time I mentioned needing the house to myself for a day to rest or to have friends over, there was always a reason it wasn't convenient. Always something that required my space, my time, my patience. And then, the truly shattering discovery. About 3 weeks before that dinner, I was going through my banking statements to prepare my quarterly accounts. I had set up a secondary savings account years ago, a quiet account I kept separate from my main finances, meant as an emergency fund. I had not touched it in a long time. When I pulled it up on my screen, I noticed 2 withdrawals I had not made. $400 withdrawn 7 months ago, $600 withdrawn 5 months ago. I sat very still at my desk with the statements in front of me, and I went through every memory I had of those months. I had not taken that money. I had not transferred it. The only people who had ever been in proximity to my financial paperwork were people in this house, and there was only one person who had ever seen me enter the PIN to that account, on the occasion I had used the ATM while he was with me. Nathan. My son had taken $1,000 from my emergency savings without asking, without telling me, without any acknowledgement at all. I did not say anything that day. I kept that information inside me like a stone, and I watched, and I thought, and I made very quiet decisions that nobody knew I was making. The dinner happened on a Tuesday. I had cooked roast chicken with potatoes and a green salad. I had set the table properly, the way my mother taught me, with folded napkins and everything in its place. My sister-in-law Harriet had come over, Gerald's younger sister, who visited once a month. Harriet was warm and easy to be around, and I had been looking forward to the meal. We were halfway through dinner when Vivian announced, in that bright, performative way she had, that she was thinking of setting up a small yoga studio in the house. A proper one, she said, with mirrors and a sound system and the right flooring. I set my fork down very carefully. "Which room were you thinking of?" I asked. Vivian glanced at Nathan. Nathan cleared his throat. "We were thinking yours, actually," Nathan said. "It gets the best morning light, and it's the biggest room in the house. You'd be perfectly comfortable in the guest room." I looked at my son. I looked at my daughter-in-law. I looked at Harriet, who had gone very still. "My room," I said slowly. "You want my bedroom, the room I have slept in for 23 years. "It's just a room, Mom," Nathan said, and there was an edge in his voice now, a warning that I was being unreasonable before I had even responded. "It's not like it's sacred." "Nathan," Harriet said quietly, "maybe this isn't." "Harriet, this is between me and my mother," Nathan said, cutting her off. And then he looked at me and he said it, the thing he cannot unsay. "Either you give Vivian this room or you start packing. Your choice." The entire table went silent. Vivian smiled. It was a small, practiced, satisfied smile. Harriet looked at her plate. Our neighbor from next door, Margot Ellery, who had joined us for dinner that night because she was visiting from out of town, made a quiet sound that might have been a gasp. I sat with all of it for one long moment. The insult, the entitlement, the years of it. The conversations I was not supposed to hear. The skincare cream switched out in the bathroom, the fuel gauge, the car insurance, the reorganized office, the evenings without my shows, the mornings without my friends, all of it stacked silently on top of each other like bricks, and suddenly I could feel the full weight of the wall they had built around me. And instead of crumbling, I found the foundation. I picked up my cloth napkin, folded it precisely, and set it beside my plate. "All right, Nathan," I said, and my voice was so calm it felt like it belonged to someone else. "I'll go pack my bags." If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you are watching. I want to see how far a woman's voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more stories like this one to you. I walked away from that table with my back straight and my chin up, and I did not look behind me. I went to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and I took out my phone. I did not cry. I want you to understand that. I was done crying over things that had been chosen for me without my consent. I had cried enough over the years, quietly, in private, in the shower, in my car, where nobody could hear me or be burdened by it. That version of me felt very far away that night. I opened my messages and found the one my best friend Delia had sent me 6 weeks earlier. Delia Marchetti had been my friend for 31 years. We had met at a community bookkeeping course when our children were small, and something had clicked between us immediately, the way it sometimes does with people who recognize each other across a room without knowing why. She had moved away from Harlow City 4 years ago to a smaller coastal town called Clearwater Cove, about 90 minutes south of the city, and she had been nudging me to visit ever since. The message she had sent was a property listing with a note that said, "Rosa, look at this little house. It's not far from mine. I keep thinking about you sitting on this porch with a cup of coffee and finally looking relaxed for once in your life. Can you imagine it? Someday, right?" I had replied with a laughing emoji because someday felt like a word for other people's lives. But that night, I opened the listing and I looked at it with completely different eyes. The property was a small cottage-style house in Clearwater Cove. 2 bedrooms, a refurbished kitchen, a wraparound porch that looked directly out over the water, and a small garden in the back. The listing price was $162,000. It had been on the market for 3 weeks. I opened my banking app. I had $228,000 in my main savings account. Every dollar of it earned through 30 years of work, through careful and deliberate choices, through saying no to things I wanted so that I could say yes to things other people needed. My emergency fund, the one Nathan had taken from, had $8,400 remaining. I stared at those numbers for a long time. Then I took a screenshot of the property listing. Then I opened a new browser tab and looked up the real estate agent's contact information. I set my phone on the nightstand and lay back against my pillow and looked at the ceiling of the room I had slept in for 23 years. The water stain in the corner that looked like a rabbit. The crack above the window that had appeared the winter we had that terrible storm, and Gerald had climbed up onto the roof in his pajamas to check on the gutters while I stood below calling up to him to please be careful. The photo of Gerald and Nathan at a baseball game, framed on the dresser, Nathan at 11, Gerald at 43, both of them squinting into the sun with identical smiles. I felt something for all of it. Of course I did, but I no longer felt trapped by it. At 7 the next morning, I called the number from the listing. The agent's name was Bernard Okafor, and he sounded brisk and professional, and slightly surprised that someone was calling about a viewing at 7 in the morning. "I would like to see the property today, if that's possible." "I can have it available by 11, he said after a brief pause. "Does that work for you?" "Perfectly," I said. I put the phone down and sat for a moment in the quiet of my room. From downstairs I could hear the sound of the television. Nathan was already up. I could smell coffee, which meant someone had used the machine I had bought with my money that nobody had ever thanked me for. I got dressed, comfortable trousers, a soft gray blouse, my good walking shoes. I put on the pearl earrings Gerald had given me for our 30th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. 67 years old. Silver hair I had stopped trying to hide 5 years ago. Laugh lines and worry lines in equal measure, I supposed, though recently it felt more like the latter. But my eyes were clear. I went downstairs. Nathan was sprawled on the sofa, scrolling through his phone with a bowl of cereal in his lap. He looked up when I came in. "Where are you going this early?" he asked. "Out," I said. "Out where?" "Vivian wants you to take her to that appointment across town at noon." I picked up my keys from the hook by the door. "I won't be available at noon," I said. Nathan frowned. "What do you mean you won't be available?" "She's been planning this for a week," Then she can arrange her own transportation, I said pleasantly, and I opened the front door and walked out. I heard Nathan say something behind me. I did not stop. The drive to Clearwater Cove was 90 minutes of nothing but quiet roads and sea air getting stronger, the closer I got to the coast. I had a playlist I had not listened to in years, songs from the 90s that I had loved before life had gotten so crowded there was no room left for music. I played it with the windows down, and I sang along to a song I had not thought about in at least 15 years, and I felt something loosen in my chest that I had forgotten was even clenched. Bernard Okafor was waiting at the property when I arrived. He was a tall man in his 50s, with a kind face and a leather portfolio under his arm. He opened the door and stepped aside, and I walked into a house that smelled like salt air and cedar and possibility. It was small. I want to say that honestly. The living room was not large. The kitchen had been recently renovated, but modestly. The second bedroom was really just large enough for a single bed and a chair, but every window faced the water. Every window let in so much light, it felt like living inside the sky. And the porch wrapped around the front and one side, and from it you could see the whole curve of the coastline, the pale sand, the gray-green water, the line where the horizon became indistinguishable from the clouds. "What do you think?" Bernard asked, the way real estate agents do. "I think it's the right one," I said. He looked at me with that professional kindness they use when they're trying not to appear too eager. "Would you like a few days to consider it?" I've been making significant decisions my entire life," I said. "I'd like to make an offer today." Bernard blinked. Then he opened his portfolio. We sat at the kitchen table, the one the previous owners had left behind, a round table with a bleached wood surface, and we went through the paperwork. The asking price was $162,000. I offered $158,000. The agent called the seller. 20 minutes later, we had an agreement. I signed the preliminary documents on that round table, with the sound of the ocean coming through the window that Bernard had opened when we arrived, and I felt something I had not felt in so long that it took me a moment to identify it. I felt like myself. I drove back to Harlow City that afternoon with the coastal air still in my hair and something solidifying inside me like concrete setting. I stopped at a grocery store on the way home and bought groceries for myself only. A rotisserie chicken, a bottle of white wine, a small wedge of good cheese, some fruit. I had not bought things just for myself in so long the act of it felt almost radical. Nathan was on the phone in the kitchen when I came in. He shot me an irritated look as I set my grocery bags on the counter. "I need to talk to you," he said, covering the phone. "Later," I said, and began unpacking my groceries. He finished his call and came to stand beside me with his arms crossed. "Where were you this morning? Vivian missed her appointment." "I told you I wouldn't be available," I said without looking up. "That's not good enough, Mom. She needed—" "Nathan," I said, and I turned to look at him directly. "I am not Vivian's driver. I am not her errand runner. I am not her personal assistant. I am your mother, and I am done being treated like I am here to service the needs of people who cannot be bothered to say thank you." He stared at me. "What has gotten into you?" he said, and he sounded genuinely bewildered, which told me more than anything else about how invisible my years of resentment had been. He truly had not noticed, because he had never looked. "I'm getting clear on something," I said. "That's all." Vivian appeared in the doorway then, still in her exercise clothes from what was apparently a class she had managed to get to after all. She looked at the groceries on the counter, and then at me. "Are you cooking tonight?" "No," I said. "I bought dinner for myself. You two can order in." The silence that followed was the kind I had learned to recognize as the precursor to an argument neither of them knew how to start, because they had never needed to argue with me before. I had always capitulated before it got that far. I put my groceries away, poured myself a glass of the wine, and went to my room. I called Delia. She answered on the second ring, which was her way when she knew something had happened. "Rosa," she said, "talk to me." So I talked. I told her about the dinner, about what Nathan had said, about the hour I had spent looking at property listings in the dark, with the sound of fake laughter coming from downstairs. I told her about the bank withdrawals, I told her about the conversation I had overheard in the kitchen. I told her about the drive to Clearwater Cove that morning, and Bernard Okafor, and the round table with the bleached wood, and the way the ocean sounded coming through the window. And I told her I had made an offer on a house 2 blocks from hers. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then Delia Marchetti, my friend of 31 years, let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and said, "Rosa Thorne, I cannot believe you. I cannot believe you did it. Tell me everything. Are you serious? Is it really the one I sent you?" "It's really the one you sent me." "Oh my God," she said. "Oh my God, I am coming to help you move. I don't care what day it is. Name the day, and I am there." I smiled in the dark of my room. "I'll name it soon," I said. "There are a few things I need to do first." What I did not tell Delia yet, what I had not told anyone, was that there was one more thing I had discovered that day. Something I had found, not in a bank statement, not in an overheard conversation, but in a letter. I had found it 3 days before the dinner, tucked into the back of the wooden box where I kept Gerald's important papers. I had been looking for the original title deed to the house, because I had been thinking, quietly, about my options. And there, underneath his old insurance documents, and a folded map of a trip we had planned but never taken, was an envelope addressed to me in Gerald's handwriting. The letter was dated 2 years before he died. It read, "Rosa, my love, if you are reading this, then I am already gone, and first I want to say that I am sorry for leaving, and that every good thing in my life had your name on it somewhere. I am writing this because there is something I should have told you directly, and I was a coward about it. There is an account I set up years ago, a separate account, not for bills or savings or anything practical, just for you, for the day you decide to do the thing you've always wanted to do, but talked yourself out of because of me or Nathan or the mortgage or the kitchen that needed new tiles. The account number is on the back of this letter. The balance as of today is $43,000. It has been growing quietly for 11 years. It is yours, Rosa. It has always been yours. Use it to live, not just to manage. I love you more than I know how to say on paper. Gerald." I had sat with that letter for 2 hours. Then I had called the bank. The account was real. The balance, with 11 years of interest, was now $51,400. My husband, who I had buried 6 years ago, had left me a gift he had never told me about, and my son, who had been handling some of my paperwork after Gerald died, had never mentioned it either. I did not know yet whether Nathan had known about that account, but I intended to find out. The next morning, I drove to the office of a woman named Patricia Marsh. Patricia was a property and estate lawyer I had been referred to by my walking group, a compact, precise woman in her early 60s with silver-framed glasses and an expression that suggested she did not tolerate nonsense in any form. I had called her the evening before, and she had made time for me at 9 in the morning, which I appreciated. I sat across from her desk, and I laid out everything: the house in my name, the savings account, the bank withdrawals Nathan had made without authorization, the account Gerald had left me, the fact that I had already made an offer on a property in Clearwater Cove, the fact that I intended to sell the house in Harlow City. Patricia listened without interrupting. She made notes on a yellow legal pad in a handwriting so small I could not read it from across the desk. When I finished, she set her pen down and looked at me over her glasses. "The bank withdrawals," she said. "Can you document those?" "I have the statements printed and with me," I said, and slid them across the desk. She looked at them carefully. "These could constitute unauthorized access to your financial account. That is potentially a criminal matter, depending on how you want to proceed. For now," I said, "I want to protect my assets and make sure that everything I own is clearly and legally mine before I make any further moves." Patricia nodded slowly. "Smart. And the account your husband left, do you know whether your son was aware of its existence?" "I don't know yet," I said. "But I intend to find out." "We need to look at your husband's estate documentation," she said. "If that account was part of the estate and was somehow not disclosed properly during probate, that's a different matter entirely. Do you have access to the estate paperwork?" "I have all of it at home," I said. "Bring it to me," she said. In the meantime, I am going to draft 2 documents for you. One is an updated power of attorney that makes it absolutely clear you are the sole decision-maker for your assets. The other is a revised will that I would like you to look at carefully. Based on what you have told me, I think we should have a conversation about how you want your estate distributed. I looked at her steadily. My granddaughter Cora, I said. She is the only person in that family who has treated me with genuine love rather than convenience. Whatever I decide, she needs to be taken care of.
Then we will make sure she is, Patricia said.
I walked out of Patricia's office an hour later with my spine straighter than it had been in years. I went home and collected every piece of estate paperwork I could find, every document related to Gerald's passing, the probate filings, the asset declarations, everything. I brought it back to Patricia that same afternoon. She promised to have her team go through it within 48 hours. 2 days later, she called me. "Rosa," she said, and her voice had something careful in it. "I think you need to come in." I sat across from Patricia again the following morning. She had a second file open on her desk now, alongside the original one. Her expression was professional, but her eyes told me something was not ordinary. "When your husband's estate went through probate," she said slowly, "there was a process by which all assets were declared and distributed. The account Gerald left you was separate from the estate, held in your name jointly with a transfer on death designation. It was never part of the probate process. Which means it should have transferred to you automatically when he passed. No probate needed, no legal process. The bank simply needed to be notified, and you would have received access immediately." She paused. "Did you ever receive any notification about this account from the bank after Gerald died?" I thought carefully. "No," I said. "Did anyone help you manage Gerald's affairs in the period after his death? Handle correspondence, phone calls, paperwork?" I already knew what was coming. I could feel it before I said the words. "Nathan handled most of it," I said. "I was in no state to manage anything in those first months. He said he would take care of it." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Rosa, I want to tread carefully here because I don't have all the facts yet. But it appears that this account was either not reported to the appropriate parties at the time, or if it was, something interrupted the transfer process. We need to request the records from the bank going back 6 years to understand what happened." "You are asking me if my son deliberately withheld this account from me after my husband died," I said. "I am asking us both to look carefully at what the evidence shows before drawing conclusions." I looked at the window behind her head. It was raining outside, the kind of steady gray rain that makes everything look waterlogged and soft. "Whatever it shows," I said, "I want to know the truth." "I will get you the truth," she said. "I promise you that." I returned home that evening to find Vivian in the living room with 2 of her friends, women I have never met, sitting on my sofa eating snacks from my kitchen while they watched something on my television. There were shoes scattered across the hallway. There was a half-empty bottle of sparkling water on the coffee table without a coaster. There were crumbs on my good cushions. One of the women smiled at me. "Oh, are you Nathan's mom? Vivian talks about you all the time. She says you're so supportive." I looked at Vivian. Vivian smiled, the small, practiced, satisfied one. "I'll be in my room," I said, and walked past all of them without another word. I sat on my bed and breathed through my nose until my hands stopped shaking. Not from sadness, from the particular strain of holding yourself together when everything inside you is rearranging itself into something new. I sent Delia a message, a single sentence. "I think it's worse than I thought." She called me back in 30 seconds. I told her everything about the account, about what Patricia had found, about the timeline. Delia listened without speaking, which was unusual for her, and which told me she understood the gravity of it. "Rosa," she said finally, "do you have any idea how strong you are? Most people would have crumbled by now. You are sitting in the middle of all of this, and you are still thinking clearly. You are still making good decisions. You are still choosing yourself." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel like someone pulled up a floorboard, and there was something terrible underneath. And I have to keep staring at it." "That's exactly what strength looks like sometimes," Delia said. It's not the absence of pain. It's looking at the painful thing and not running away from it. I pressed the phone against my cheek and looked at the ceiling. The water stain shaped like a rabbit. The crack above the window. I'm going to be okay, I said. You're going to be more than okay, Delia said. You're going to be free. 3 weeks passed. In those 3 weeks, the following things happened. Patricia received the bank records and confirmed that the account Gerald had set up for me had received a certified letter of notification 6 years ago, shortly after Gerald's death, addressed to me at the house. The letter had been signed for. Patricia cross-referenced the signature. It matched Nathan's handwriting on several other documents from the same period. The account had sat dormant because no one had responded to the bank's notification within the required window. After that window passed, the account remained technically active but unclaimed, quietly accumulating interest until I had found Gerald's letter and called the bank myself. My son had signed for a letter meant for me, a letter that would have told me my husband had left me $50,000. He had signed for it and said nothing. I held that information carefully inside me like a burning coal while I made my plans. The house in Clearwater Cove was processing. Bernard had been in regular contact. The paperwork was moving forward, and he expected the sale to close within 2 weeks. I had arranged the transfer of funds from my savings account directly to the title company's escrow account, bypassing my joint household account entirely. The house in Harlow City, the one I had lived in for 23 years, the one I had owned in my name alone since before Nathan was born because my parents had gifted it to me when I got married, and I had insisted on keeping it in my name. That house had been quietly listed with an agent named Clara Vasquez, who had come to take photographs on a Thursday morning while Nathan and Vivian were both out. Clara had told me the house was likely to move quickly. She had been right. Within 10 days, I had 3 serious inquiries and 2 showing appointments scheduled for mornings when the house would be empty of Nathan and Vivian's presence. I had not told Nathan anything. My granddaughter Cora called me on a Tuesday. Cora was 23, Nathan's daughter from a previous relationship, a quiet and perceptive young woman who had always had more of her grandfather's temperament than her father's. She called occasionally to check on me, not because she needed anything, but just to talk. And those calls had been some of the steadiest, warmest things in my life for years. "Grandma Rosa," she said when I answered, "are you okay? You sound different." "Different how?" I asked. "Clearer," she said after a pause, "like something settled." I smiled at that. "Something has, sweetheart." "Dad called me last week," she said carefully. "He said you were acting strangely, that you weren't yourself." I thought about that for a moment. "Cora, I think I might be more myself than I have been in a very long time." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good." Just that word, good. "Whatever you're doing," she said, "I just want you to know I'm on your side. I've watched how things have been at that house for years, and I've never said anything because I didn't know how. But Grandma, you deserve so much better than what you've been given." I felt something rise in my throat that I had to push back down carefully. "Thank you, Cora," I said. "That means more than you know. Can I visit you soon? I have something to show you." The house in Clearwater Cove closed on a Thursday. I sat at the title company's table across from a young couple who were buying a vacation property 2 doors down from mine, and I signed my name beside Bernard's finger pointing, page after page, and at the end of it I held the keys to a house that belonged entirely to me, in a coastal town where nobody expected anything from me at all. I called Delia from the parking lot. "It's done," I said. She screamed. She absolutely screamed into the phone. I had to hold it away from my ear, laughing. "I'm bringing wine," she said. "I'm bringing dinner. I'm bringing everything. When are you moving? I need a date. Give me a date, Rosa. There are still some things to handle here." "The house sale?" "That? And something else." "The Nathan thing?" "Yes." Delia was quiet for a second. "How are you going to handle it?" "I don't know yet," I said. "But Patricia is helping me, and whatever we decide, I want it to be measured. I don't want to destroy my son. I want accountability." They're different things. You are a better woman than I am, Delia said, but there was admiration in it, not judgment. I'm a mother, I said, even when motherhood is the most complicated thing in the world. That evening, the buyers for the Harlow City house made their offer. A family with 2 young children who had fallen in love with the backyard garden, the light in the kitchen, the quiet of the street. They offered $298,000. Clara called me as I was preparing dinner, and I sat down on a kitchen stool to absorb the number. The house had been in my family for 40 years. It was worth $298,000. My son had no idea I was selling it. Tell them I accept, I said. Clara confirmed. Then she said, Mrs. Thorne, when do you need the occupants to vacate? By the end of the month, I said. There will be no issue. And does everyone in the house know about this sale?
They will, I said.
That night, Nathan knocked on my bedroom door at 10 o'clock.
Mom, do you have a minute? Come in.
He came in and sat in the chair by the window, the way he used to when he was a teenager, and something was bothering him, but he did not know how to begin. He looked tired. He had been looking tired for weeks, which I suspected was partly job stress and partly something else. Something that showed in the way he was watching me lately, as if he had begun to sense that I was not quite the person he thought I was anymore. I think Vivian and I should probably start looking for our own place, he said. I looked at him, and I know things haven't been easy. I want you to know I hear that. It was the most thoughtful thing he had said to me in months, and I received it with the caution it deserved. I appreciate you saying that, I said. I know the dinner thing was bad, he said. I shouldn't have said it the way I said it. I shouldn't have said it at all.
No, you shouldn't have. He rubbed the back of his neck. Can we start over? Is that possible?
Starting over requires understanding what went wrong in the first place, I said. And I don't think you understand it yet, Nathan. Not fully. Who I had loved completely and without condition for every day of his life, including this one. There will be time for that conversation, I said, but not tonight. Tonight I want you to think about something. What? Whether the love you've shown me in the past several years has been love, or whether it's been something else, wearing love's clothes. He stared at me. Good night, Nathan, I said. He left the room. I went to my desk and opened my laptop and wrote an email to Patricia. I told her I was ready to have the conversation about the bank account situation with Nathan, but that I wanted her present. I told her I needed to know exactly what our legal options were before I said anything to him. I told her I did not want to make accusations without evidence, but I also was not willing to pretend the evidence did not exist. She replied within an hour, which told me she had been thinking about it too.
I have the full documentation, her email read. Let me know when you are ready. And Rosa, you are handling this with remarkable composure. That composure will serve you well in whatever comes next. 3 days later, something happened that I had not anticipated. I came downstairs to the kitchen at 7 in the morning to find Vivian sitting at the table with her laptop open, and on the screen, clearly visible because the angle was wrong and the font was large, was an email she appeared to be drafting. The header showed a name I recognized. It was the address of my neighbor Margot Ellery, who had been at the dinner, who had witnessed everything. I did not read the whole email. I saw enough. I saw the phrase increasingly confused and making decisions she may later regret, and might benefit from a wellness check. Vivian looked up and saw me standing there. She closed the laptop immediately. Good morning, she said brightly. What are you writing to Margot? I asked.
Just a friendly note, she said. We got to talking at the dinner and I wanted to follow up. I poured myself coffee and said nothing more. But I took my phone into the garden and sent Margot a text message. Margot, please call me when you can. It's important. Margot called me within the hour. She was in the middle of her drive back to the city, already 3 days into her return trip, and she answered on hands-free. Rosa, I was going to call you myself. I've been thinking about you since that dinner. Are you all right? I'm better than all right, I said. But Margot, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know it before you receive any kind of communication from Vivian." There was a careful pause. "Go on." I told her what I had seen on the screen, the phrases I had caught, my suspicion about what Vivian was trying to do. "She's trying to frame a narrative," Margot said immediately. She was a retired social worker, and she understood these things efficiently. "She wants people around you to start questioning your judgment. If you make a large financial decision that affects her comfort, she wants a story already in circulation that explains it as instability rather than autonomy." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what I thought." "Rosa, I want you to know something. I was at that table. I heard what Nathan said to you. I watched you respond. You were the calmest, clearest person in that room. Whatever Vivian writes to me or anyone else, I know what I saw." "Thank you," I said. "And if she does reach out to you, I'll let you know immediately. And I won't be responding to anything that paints you as anything other than what you are, which is a woman who has been treated poorly and is finally doing something about it." I exhaled very slowly. "Tell me you have people around you," Margot said. "I have Delia," I said, "and my lawyer, and Cora." "Then you have enough," Margot said. "Keep them close." When I went back inside, Vivian had moved to the living room. Nathan was not home. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, and I pulled out the small notebook I had been keeping since that first morning after the dinner. I had been writing things down, dates, conversations, observations, not obsessively, not vengefully, just carefully, the way I used to keep books when I was a professional bookkeeper, methodically, accurately, without editorial. I added what I had seen on Vivian's screen, and the time I had seen it. Then I called Patricia. "There is a new development," I said, and told her about the email. Patricia's response was measured but immediate. "She may be trying to establish a paper trail that questions your mental fitness in case you make decisions she wants to legally challenge." The bank account situation, the house sale, any of it. If someone can argue you were not of sound mind, it complicates things. "Can they do that?" "They can try," she said, "but the documentation we have, your financial records, your consistent correspondence, your transaction history, all of it tells the story of a woman who is thinking clearly and acting deliberately. We have everything we need to counter it. But I want you to also go see your doctor, a routine wellness visit. Just get it documented that you are in good health, physically and cognitively." I called my doctor's office that same afternoon, Dr. Hannah Osei, who I had seen for 14 years and who I trusted completely. I explained I wanted a routine checkup, general wellness, nothing specific. She fit me in for Friday morning. Friday came, and I drove to Dr. Hannah Osei's office, and sat in her examination room while she went through everything with the thoroughness I had come to expect from her. Blood pressure, cognitive screenings, reflex tests, blood drawn for the usual panel. She asked me questions about stress, about sleep, about diet. "You seem well," she said at the end. "Better than your last visit, actually. You have a kind of energy you didn't have 6 months ago." "I've made some decisions," I said. She smiled. "Whatever they are, they seem to be agreeing with you. I'll have your blood work back by Tuesday, and I don't anticipate any issues. How are things at home?" "I am in the process of making significant changes." "Good," she said simply, and I could see she understood more than I had said. On the drive home, something occurred to me. Something about the phone call I had overheard Vivian making 8 months ago, almost the day Nathan and Vivian had moved in. She had told whoever she was speaking to that this could work out to their benefit for a long time if they just played it right. She had said, we, not just she and Nathan, someone else. I sat with that for a while. That evening, while Nathan and Vivian were watching television, and I was ostensibly reading in my room, I did something I am not entirely proud of, but which I believe was necessary. I went through Nathan's desk. The desk in the corner of the guest room that he used as a home office, where he kept his files. I was looking for, I did not quite know what, something that would help me understand the full shape of what I was dealing with. What I found was a thick envelope, tucked beneath a folder labeled Utilities. Inside the envelope was a series of handwritten letters and printed emails. The emails were between Nathan and a man named Terrence Holloway, who turned out to be Vivian's brother. They went back over a year, before Nathan and Vivian had even moved into my house. The letters discussed a plan, not in dramatic, conspiratorial terms, in the matter-of-fact, business-like tone of people who believe they are being practical. The plan, as I understood it from 20 minutes of reading in Nathan's dim office with the door locked, was roughly this. Nathan would move himself and Vivian into my house, citing financial difficulty, which was real enough, but with the additional agenda of positioning themselves to benefit from the house's eventual sale or inheritance. The house was worth approximately $300,000. Nathan believed, incorrectly, that he had some legal claim to it through the fact of having lived there as a child, and that by being physically present and establishing residency, he could strengthen that position. Terrence had apparently advised Nathan that the key was to make me comfortable enough that I would not resist, while simultaneously managing the financial picture in a way that depleted my independent resources gradually, making me more reliant on the household arrangement. That explained the bank withdrawals. That explained the car insurance. That explained all the small, deniable leachings of money and resources that I had explained away as spotlessness when they were something more calculated. I sat in that room for a long time. Then I photographed every document with my phone. I put the envelope back exactly as I had found it. I unlocked the door and walked calmly back to my room. I texted Patricia. "I have new evidence. Can we meet tomorrow morning?" Her reply came back in under 5 minutes. 8 o'clock. I'll have coffee ready. I sat on my bed in the dark and breathed. I thought about Gerald. I thought about the letter he had written, the account he had set up quietly for me, the way he had said, use it to live, not just to manage. I thought about how he would feel knowing what had happened in his house since he left it. I thought about how he would feel knowing our son had been part of something like this. I did not cry. I had learned to save my tears for things that deserved them. What I felt instead was a grief that had nothing to do with sadness and everything to do with clarity. Before I go on, because I know this story might be reaching people in living rooms and kitchens and late nights when the children are asleep and you are finally getting a moment to breathe, I want to pause and say something. If my words are finding you wherever you are, show me that they reached you. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. And tell me from which city you are watching. I genuinely want to know how far a woman's story can travel when it is told honestly. This community we are building here, it matters. Every comment, every city, every name. Help me grow it so we can keep bringing you stories like this one. Patricia's office at 8 in the morning had a quality of seriousness that felt appropriate to what we were doing. She poured coffee and I placed my phone on her desk and showed her the photographs of the documents. She read through them without speaking. When she finished, she set the phone down and was quiet for a long moment. "This is more organized than I expected," she said finally. "Yes," I agreed. "The bank withdrawal, taken alongside this correspondence, suggests a deliberate pattern of financial exploitation. That has legal consequences." She looked at me. "Rosa, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. What outcome do you want from this?" I had thought about this for most of the night. "I want my money returned," I said. "The $1,000 from the emergency account, and whatever portion of the $51,000 from Gerald's account can be proven to have been delayed by Nathan's interference. I want documentation that this house belongs entirely to me, and that my sale of it is legally unimpeachable. I want my will updated to reflect my actual wishes, and then I want to leave and never have this version of this conversation again." "You don't want to prosecute?" "He's my son," I said. "I want accountability. I want him to understand what he did, but I don't want to spend the next 3 years in litigation. I want my life back." Patricia nodded slowly. "Then here's what I suggest. We send Nathan a formal letter, through me, documenting what we have found. We make clear that we are aware of the plan outlined in that correspondence. We request repayment of the demonstrably taken funds. We make clear that the house sale is proceeding and is legally sound, and we indicate that if he cooperates, and if he refrains from any further action to interfere with your financial autonomy, we will consider the matter resolved. And if he doesn't cooperate?" "Then we file," she said simply, "and we win." I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup. "Send the letter," I said. The letter arrived at the house 3 days later. Nathan received it while I was out at a grocery run. By the time I returned, he was sitting at the kitchen table with the opened envelope in front of him, white-faced and very still. Vivian was standing near the doorway with her arms crossed and her expression doing something complex and unreadable. Nathan looked up when I came in. I set my groceries on the counter and waited. "Mom," he said. His voice came out strange, thin. "Nathan," I said. "This letter," he gestured at it. "Where did you get this?" "From my lawyer," I said, "who I have been working with for several weeks now." "What does she mean she has evidence of a plan?" Vivian said, and her voice had shed its practiced softness. She sounded genuinely rattled. "Nathan, what did you tell her?" "I didn't tell her anything," Nathan said, and his voice had something in it now that I had not heard in a very long time. He sounded like a boy who had been caught in something he knew was wrong and had no story left to hide behind. "The evidence isn't what he told me," I said calmly. "It's what I found." The room was very quiet. "The letter your father left me," I said. "The account he set up. The certified notice from the bank 6 years ago that someone signed for and never mentioned to me." "Was that you?" Nathan looked at the table. That look told me everything. "I want you to understand something," I said, and I kept my voice level, because I had decided days ago that I would not shout. I would not break down. I would not perform any of the emotions he might have expected. I was simply going to speak the truth. Your father left me that money because he loved me, and he wanted me to have independence. You signed for the notification and said nothing, which means I spent 6 years without access to money that was mine and that your father intended for me. That is a betrayal I am going to spend a long time processing." Nathan said nothing. He looked like he had been struck. "And the money you took from my emergency account," I continued. "I have the statements. My lawyer has the statements. We know the dates and the amounts." Vivian opened her mouth. "Don't," I said, and something in my voice stopped her. "Vivian, please do not say a word right now, because I also know about the email you were drafting to my friend Margot, and I know about your brother Terrence, and I know what was in those letters." The color drained from her face. "What I want from both of you," I said, "is simple. The money Nathan took from my emergency account, returned in full, within 2 weeks. Nathan's signature on a document acknowledging that the house and all its contents are mine alone, and that the sale currently in process is valid and will not be contested. And I want both of you out of this house by the end of the month." "Mom, Nathan began. "I am not finished," I said quietly. "I need you to hear one more thing. I have loved you every day of your life. I love you right now, in this moment, even with all of this in the room between us. But that love does not mean I will allow what has happened here to continue. It does not mean I will pretend the account didn't exist or that the plan wasn't real. Love is not the same as permission." Nathan put his face in his hands. Vivian sat down in a chair without speaking. I picked up my groceries and went to put them away. The next 2 weeks were unlike anything I had lived through before. Nathan signed the document Patricia sent him. He signed it without argument, which I think surprised Patricia, and which, in its way, surprised me too. Perhaps somewhere under the layers of entitlement and poor decisions, there was still a man who knew the difference between right and wrong when it was held in front of him plainly enough. He deposited the $1,000 into my emergency account 2 days after I had asked for it. He did not, in those 2 weeks, say very much to me directly. He was present in the house, but carefully, quietly, like someone moving through a space they know they no longer belong in. Vivian had taken on the same quality. The brash certainty had left her. She moved through the kitchen and the hallway, as though she were a guest who had overstayed her welcome and knew it. On a Wednesday evening, 10 days before the end of the month, I was sitting in the living room reading when Nathan came and stood in the doorway. "Can I sit with you for a minute?" he asked. "You can," I said. He sat in the armchair across from me and was quiet for a long time. Outside, the evening light was doing that thing it does in late autumn, when the year is getting ready to let go, slanting gold through the windows and making everything look temporary and beautiful. I'm going to be in therapy starting next week, he said. I already called. I have a first appointment. I set my book in my lap. That's a good decision, I said. I know what I did was wrong, he said. Not just the money, all of it. The dinner, the room, the way I've been treating you for years. He paused. I knew about the account, Mom. I knew about it from the beginning. I told myself I was protecting you from having to deal with more financial complexity right after Dad died. I told myself you couldn't handle it at the time. That was a lie you told yourself, I said. It was? And the plan with Terrence? He pressed his lips together. I'm ashamed of it. I don't have an explanation that isn't going to sound like an excuse. Then don't give me one, I said. Just tell me if you understand what it cost me. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. You spent 6 years without money your husband saved for you over 11 years, because of a choice I made. Because I convinced myself I had reasons that were good enough. He stopped. They weren't good enough. Nothing I could say was good enough. I looked at him. I looked at my son, this complicated and flawed and still, somehow beloved person. No, I said, nothing could be good enough. But this conversation is a start. Will you ever forgive me? I don't know yet, I said. But I want you to work on becoming someone who deserves it. Not for me, for yourself. He nodded. He sat with me in the living room for another half hour, not really talking, just existing in the same space in a way we had not done in years. And something about that felt sad and necessary in equal measure. Cora came to visit that weekend. She drove down from the university town where she was finishing her master's degree, arriving on Saturday morning with a bag of fresh pastries from a bakery she knew I loved, and she hugged me at the door for a long time without saying anything. She looked at the house differently than she had on past visits. Her eyes moved over the furniture, the walls, the boxes I had quietly begun to pack. And I could see her understanding something. You're leaving, she said. Yes. Does my dad know? He knows the house is sold, I said. He doesn't know where I'm going yet. Cora sat at the kitchen table, with her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, and looked at me with those serious, dark eyes. Grandma Rosa, she said, are you happy? I thought about that properly. I am becoming happy, I said. I think that's the honest answer. I am in the process of building happiness, the way you build anything real. Carefully and with intention. It was a smile so much like Gerald's that it caught me for a moment. I want to show you something, I said. I opened my laptop and pulled up the listing for the Clearwater Cove house. The photographs Bernard had taken after the sale went through. The exteriors in their coastal morning light. The porch with its view of the water. The small garden with the stone path. Cora looked at the screen for a long time. It's beautiful, she said softly. It's mine, I said, and felt the same private electricity those words still gave me every time. Can I visit? She asked. You can visit whenever you want, I said. You will always have a room there. That's a promise. The end of the month came the way endings do when you've been watching them approach for a while, quietly and all at once. Nathan and Vivian moved to a one-bedroom apartment across the city. Vivian's brother Terrence had apparently offered some financial help, which I found darkly amusing. The move took a full day. I had made myself scarce, spending the day at a coffee shop around the corner with a book and my notebook, returning only when the house was quiet. When I walked back in that evening, the house felt different. It felt lighter. I stood in the hallway and breathed it in. I walked through every room, the living room with the afternoon light pooling on the floor, the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals, the backyard garden that was going to be someone else's to tend now, the new family's little ones running across the grass, and something about that image felt right and not sad. Just 3 words. I'm sorry, Mom. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. Moving day was the following Saturday. Delia drove up from Clearwater Cove in a borrowed van, along with her neighbor Augusto, who was apparently happy to help move boxes in exchange for lunch, and my former colleague Priya, who had always been more of a friend than a professional acquaintance, and who had been horrified when I had finally told her the full story over the phone 2 weeks earlier.
The four of us packed the last of my things, the pieces I had chosen to bring, the photographs that mattered, Gerald's watch, the quilt from the trip we had taken to the Highlands when Nathan was a teenager, my books, my good kitchen knives, the small watercolor painting a friend had given me 40 years ago that I had hung in every home I had ever lived in. I also packed in a small fireproof box Gerald's letter, the one he had written me before he died, the one that had changed everything. We loaded the van in the morning. The new owners were taking possession the following week, so the house had a few days of echo to it, the sound of rooms becoming empty. At the very end, when the van was loaded and Delia and Priya and Augusto were waiting by the curb, I went through the house one final time alone. I walked slowly. I let myself feel all of it, the memories, the weight of years, the complicated love and the complicated grief, and the particular feeling of letting go of something that has shaped you, even when staying in it would have diminished you. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment. I pressed my hand flat against the kitchen counter, the way you might press your hand against the bark of a tree you are saying goodbye to. Thank you, I said, to the house, to Gerald, to the version of myself that had lived here and done her best. Then I walked out the front door and pulled it closed behind me. I did not look back. Delia was leaning against the van with her arms folded and her chin tilted up, watching me come down the path. When I reached her, she put her arm around my shoulders, and we stood there for a moment, just the two of us, the way we had stood in various doorways across 31 years of friendship. "Ready?" she said. "More than ready," I said. The drive to Clearwater Cove was 90 minutes. I rode in the passenger seat of Delia's borrowed van, with the window down and the autumn air pouring in, and the coastal smell getting stronger with every mile. Delia talked. She told me about her week, about her neighbor's dog that had gotten into the garden and rooted up 3 of her best rose bushes, about the new cafe that had opened on the boardwalk that she thought I was going to love. I listened and watched the landscape change, the flat city streets giving way to winding roads, and then glimpses of gray-blue water through the trees. We pulled up in front of the cottage in Clearwater Cove at 11:30 in the morning. The sun was out. The sea was visible from the driveway, shimmering in the distance. The wraparound porch was there exactly as I remembered it, and someone, I suspected Delia, had placed a potted plant by the front door. I sat in the passenger seat for a moment, just looking at it. "It's yours," Delia said, the same words Cora had echoed, and they still held that same impossible sweetness. "It's mine," I said. I got out of the van and walked up to the front door, and unlocked it with my key, and stepped over the threshold into a house that smelled like salt air and new beginnings, and the particular kind of quiet that only ever lives near the ocean. The first morning I woke up in the Clearwater Cove house, I lay in bed for a long time, just listening. The sound of the water was different here than I had expected. I had imagined it would be dramatic, constant crashing and pulling, the kind of sound you think of when you imagine the sea. But it was softer than that, more rhythmic, more like breathing, like the ocean was simply alive and unhurried and completely unbothered by anything I was carrying into its proximity. I got up at 6, made coffee, opened the door to the porch, and carried my mug out and sat in the wooden chair I had placed there specifically for this. The morning air was cold and fresh and tasted like salt. The sky was doing something spectacular, pale pink at the horizon, deepening to the kind of blue that looks like something from a painting. I sat there for 45 minutes without moving. Delia found me when she came over at 7 with pastries from the cafe on the boardwalk. She appeared on the path to the porch, still in her coat, a bag swinging from her hand, and she stopped when she saw me sitting there. "You look like you belong here," she said. "I do," I said, and I meant it in the way that some true things can only be said simply. We had breakfast together on the porch, the two of us with our coffee and our pastries, watching the light change over the water. We talked about small things, the plan for settling the furniture, the hardware shop down the road where I could find some shelving brackets, the walking path along the beach that Delia took every morning and that she wanted to show me. "There's a group of women," Delia said, breaking a piece of her pastry. "They walk on the beach 3 mornings a week, just women who live nearby, some retired, some just local. I think you'll love them." "I'd like that," I said.
After Delia left, I spent the afternoon alone, unpacking slowly. I was not in a hurry. For the first time in longer than I could remember, there was no hurry required of me. I put books on the shelf in the living room. I hung the small watercolor painting on the wall beside the kitchen window, where the light would catch it properly. I placed Gerald's watch in a small dish on the dresser in my bedroom, where I could see it from the bed. I made up the guest room with clean linens, because I had already decided that the guest room in this house was going to be a room that was genuinely for guests, people who came because they wanted to see me, not because they needed something from me. That evening, I cooked a simple dinner for myself. A piece of good fish I had bought from a stall at the market near the cottage, roasted with lemon and herbs, some bread, some salad. I ate it on the porch, watching the sun go down over the water. I thought about Gerald, I thought about the letter. I had placed it in a frame. I had not been sure I was going to do that, but when it came to it, I had gone to the small framing shop in the main street of Clearwater Cove and had the letter properly mounted and framed, and it was now hanging in my bedroom, the last thing I saw before the light went out. I thought about what he had written. Use it to live, not just to manage. I was going to use it to live. 6 days after I moved in, Patricia called. I have a final update for you, she said. The bank has confirmed the full timeline regarding Gerald's account. They've acknowledged that the notification was improperly handled on their end as well, as the follow-up was not appropriately escalated when there was no response within the window. They've offered a goodwill settlement of $1,800 for their part in the delay. That's something, I said. There is one more thing. I spoke to Nathan's attorney, who reached out as part of their process. Nathan has agreed to sign a formal acknowledgement of the situation and has authorized the return of what he can reasonably be considered to have impeded access to. Given that the account accumulated interest independently and you now have full access, his attorney is suggesting a payment of $5,000 as acknowledgement of the 6 years of delayed access. I was quiet for a moment. Is that legally reasonable? We could push for more. But you told me you wanted resolution, not litigation. This is resolution. Accept it, I said. I'll draw up the documentation, she said. And Rosa, for what it's worth, you handled every part of this with more grace than most people would have managed. I hope the new chapter is everything it should be. It already is, I said. The women Delia had mentioned were named Frederica, Bea, and Yolanda. They were wonderful in the way that women who have been through things and come out the other side tend to be. Uncomplicated, warm, direct, with a humor that ran through everything they said like water through stone. Frederica was 69, a former nurse who had retired to Clearwater Cove after her husband died and her children scattered to various corners of the country. Bea was 64, a retired schoolteacher who had chosen the coast after a marriage that ended with her deciding she would rather be alone and happy than together and invisible. Yolanda was 71 and had lived in Clearwater Cove her whole life, the kind of woman who knew the name of every shopkeeper and every dog and every particular light the sky made at different hours of the day. They welcomed me the way those women always do, with immediate practical warmth. Frederica brought me a jar of the preserves she made herself. Yolanda told me exactly which days to go to the market if I wanted the best fish. Bea invited me to the Tuesday evening reading group at the community hall, where a rotating selection of 6 women read whatever they wanted and then argued about it over wine, which sounded perfect to me. I walked with them 3 mornings a week, along the beach path that wound behind the cottage rows and down to the flat sand near the water. The mornings were cold enough in late autumn that we wore good coats and wrapped scarves around our necks, and the walks were an hour of something that I had not had access to in years. Conversation that required nothing of me except honesty, company that expected nothing except presence. One morning, about 2 weeks after I had joined them, Frederica fell into step beside me, while Bea and Yolanda were ahead of us, arguing cheerfully about something they had read. Delia told us a little of your story, she said. Not apologetically, just directly. Not details, just that you had made a big change recently and were starting over. Yes, I said. I did the same thing, she said. Not the same circumstances, but the same essential decision. to choose myself after years of choosing everyone else first. She was quiet for a moment, her hands in her coat pockets. The thing nobody tells you about that decision is that it takes a while to stop expecting someone to punish you for it. You spend the first few months waiting for the consequence, waiting to feel guilty enough to go back. I looked at her. Yes, I said, that's exactly it. But the consequence never comes, she said. And one morning you wake up and the guilt isn't the first thing anymore. Something else is. Peace, maybe. Or just the ordinary beauty of the morning. And that's when you know you actually made it. I thought about that for the rest of the walk. Nathan called me on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after I moved. I was in the kitchen making soup, and my phone buzzed on the counter, and I saw his name, and I set down my spoon and picked up the phone. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi, Nathan," I said. There was a pause. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm good," I said. "Genuinely good." "Good," he said. "That's good." Another pause. "I've had 2 therapy sessions now." "How are they going?" "Hard," he said. "Useful, I think." Hard. The useful things often are, I said. "My therapist asked me to think about a time when I saw you as a person rather than as a role," he said. "Mom rather than mother." And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had done that. That felt important to know. "It is important," I said. "I don't expect things to be fixed," he said. "I just wanted to call, to check in, as a person checking in on another person." "I appreciate that, Nathan. Can I ask where you are?" "Clearwater Cove," I said. "I bought a house near Delia." There was a long pause. "The town where Delia lives," he said. "Yes," I said. Another pause. "Is it nice there?" "It's very nice," I said. "I'm glad," he said, and it sounded like he meant it, or at least was working hard at meaning it, which was something. We spoke for 20 minutes. Nothing dramatic, nothing resolved, just 2 people who loved each other, in damaged and complicated ways, figuring out whether there was a cleaner version of that love still possible, somewhere ahead of them. When we hung up, I stood at the kitchen window and watched the last light go off the water. I want to stop for just a moment, because I know so many of you listening to this have your own version of this story, your own dining table, your own moment of clarity, your own list of things you said yes to when every part of you wanted to say no. If this story is reaching you where you live, in whatever city, in whatever corner of the world your life has placed you, please let me know you are here. Like this video and subscribe so we can keep building this space together. Drop your city in the comments. I genuinely mean it when I say that knowing how far a woman's honest voice can travel gives me the same feeling Rosa felt standing on that porch for the first time. Help me grow this community, because there are more stories coming, and every single one of them belongs to women just like us. A month into life in Clearwater Cove, something unexpected happened. I was at the Tuesday evening reading group, the one B had brought me to, and we were discussing a novel none of us had entirely loved, but all had opinions about. And afterward, in the mingling with wine and the particular warmth of women talking freely, I got into a long conversation with a woman I had not met before. Her name was Louisa Ferrand. She was 63, she told me, originally from the south of the country, had worked in bookkeeping and small business accounting for 30 years, had moved to Clearwater Cove the previous spring after an early retirement. She was sharp and funny, and when she said she had spent her career in bookkeeping, I felt that particular click of recognition that you feel when you meet someone whose mind works like yours. "What did you do?" she asked me. "Same, more or less," I said. "Freelance, 30 years of other people's accounts." "Do you miss it?" I thought about that honestly. "I miss the problem-solving part," I said, "not the administrative grind. I miss sitting down with a set of numbers and understanding the story they're telling." Louisa tilted her head slightly. "Have you thought about doing anything with that here?" "Not really," I said. "I've been focused on just settling in. There are a lot of small businesses in this town. The cafe on the boardwalk, the market, the pottery studio up the road. Most of them are run by people who love what they make or sell and have no idea how to manage their books. The accountant in town retired last year, and nobody has replaced him." I looked at her with slightly more attention than I had been paying before.
Are you suggesting something? I said. I'm making a casual observation, she said, with a smile that suggested she was doing slightly more than that. I drove home that evening thinking about it. The next morning on the porch with my coffee, I sat with the idea. Not the idea of returning to what I had always done, the thing I did for other people's convenience, the work I had fit around everyone else's needs, but the idea of doing something that was mine, on my own terms, my own hours, my own client list, something I chose and shaped and controlled. I called Delia. What do you think? I said, when I had explained the conversation with Louisa. I think, Delia said, that you are the most competent bookkeeper I have ever met in my life, which is saying something because I have met a lot of people who claim to be competent bookkeepers. And I think that if you opened even a part-time practice here, you would have more clients than you wanted within 6 months. I don't want more clients than I can manage comfortably, I said. Then you'd have exactly as many as you want, she said, which is the difference between doing it for you and doing it for everyone else. I went to see Louisa the following week. We had coffee at her kitchen table, which was covered in the organized chaos of someone actively building something, and I told her I had been thinking about what she said. I'm not looking to build something large, I said. I want something manageable, something that keeps my mind active and contributes to the community here without taking over my life. Louisa nodded. What if we did it together? I've been thinking about something similar. Neither of us wants a firm, but between the two of us, we could cover enough clients to make it worthwhile without either of us being overwhelmed. I looked at her. A partnership. A very small, very relaxed partnership, she said, with absolute right of refusal for either of us on any client we don't want to take on, and absolute flexibility on hours. Absolute. I held out my hand across the coffee table. She shook it. We called it Thorne and Farrand Bookkeeping Services, and we set up a simple web page, printed a small number of cards, and left a few at the cafe and the market and the community board near the library. Within 3 weeks, we had 4 clients. Within 2 months, we had 9. We worked 3 mornings a week, from our respective kitchen tables mostly, occasionally meeting at the small workspace above the bookshop that rented by the day for a reasonable rate. It was the best work I had done in years. Not because it was dramatically different from what I had always done, but because it was mine. Every client I took on was a client I had chosen. Every morning I worked was a morning I had decided to work. Every invoice I sent contained my name, not as an obligation, but as a choice. Cora came to visit in the 2nd month. She arrived on a Friday afternoon with a backpack and the kind of uncomplicated happiness I had come to associate specifically with her. She threw her arms around me at the door and smelled like the cold air of the journey, and I held her for a moment longer than strictly necessary. I showed her the house, the room she would always have here, the porch, the garden beginning to establish itself with the small plants I had put in. We walked to the beach in the late afternoon, and she took off her shoes and walked in the cold edge of the water, while I watched from a few feet back, laughing at her reactions to how cold it was. I have news, she said, coming back to my side and shaking the water off her feet. Good news? I think so. She looked at the water. I've been accepted to a research position in the city. Proper research, the kind I've wanted to do since undergrad. I start in the spring. Cora, that's wonderful, I said. She smiled sideways at me. Dad called when he found out. He actually sounded proud of me. It was different from usual. Less like he was saying the right thing, and more like he actually felt it. I thought about that. Therapy can do that. When it's working. I think it's working, she said. She paused. He asks about you, you know. Every time we talk, he always asks how you are. What do you tell him? I tell him the truth, she said. That you seem happier than you've been in years. That you're building something good here. That you have friends and work and mornings with the ocean, and you look like someone who has finally found where she belongs. I was quiet for a moment. Does he seem relieved? Or does he seem sad? Cora considered this seriously. Both, she said. I think he's learning to hold both at the same time. That he hurt you, and you're better for being away from that. That those two things can be true simultaneously. They can. That evening we cooked together, a big pot of pasta and a salad,
and we ate on the porch with candles and old wine bottles because the autumn evening was cool enough to need them for warmth, and they gave the most beautiful light. Cora told me about her research plans, about a young man she had started seeing who sounded thoughtful and kind, about the small apartment she was hoping to find in the city near her new position. "I want to learn to cook properly," she said. "I've been living on pasta and good intentions." "Come here for a weekend," I said. "We'll spend 2 days cooking and you'll leave knowing 4 things properly." "Deal," she said immediately. After dinner, when the candles were burning low, she got quiet in the way she sometimes did before she said something important. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "When you found out about everything, the account, the letters, what Nathan knew, were you ever afraid you had wasted your life? That all those years were just lost?" I sat with that question for a long moment. "No," I said finally, and that surprised me too, because I think I expected to feel that, but the truth is that the years I gave to raising Nathan, to building the house, to working, to being present for the people I loved, those years happened. The love in them was real. It doesn't matter that the love wasn't always returned the way it should have been. What matters is that I gave it genuinely. The problem wasn't that I loved too much. The problem was that I forgot to love myself with the same consistency. Cora was quiet. "I think that's the most important thing you've ever said to me," she said. "Write it down. You're going to need it someday." She laughed and reached across the table and took my hand. 3 months after I moved to Clearwater Cove, Harriet called me. Harriet, Gerald's sister, who had been at the dinner table when Nathan had said what he said, who had looked at her plate and said nothing. She called me on a quiet Tuesday morning when I was between clients, sitting on the porch with my notebook, and I saw her name and I answered. "Rosa," she said, "I have been trying to find the right words for 3 months." "Take your time," I said. "I was there," she said. "When Nathan said those things, I was sitting right there and I said nothing. And I have thought about that every single day since. I was raised to believe that family disagreements stayed inside the family, that you didn't interfere, that it was disloyal to speak up for one person against another when they were all your family." She paused. "And I have spent 3 months understanding that silence in those moments is not loyalty. It is cowardice." I felt something soften in my chest that I had not known was still stiff. "Harriet," I said. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm truly sorry, Rosa. You deserved someone to stand up for you that night. Gerald would have. And I failed." "You're not the one who said it," I said. "No, but I could have stopped it in its tracks with one sentence. And I didn't." She paused. "I want you to know that I spoke to Nathan afterward. Not right away, not until I had thought it through properly, but I told him exactly what I thought. About the dinner, about the way things had been, about what kind of son Gerald would have wanted him to be." "How did he take it?" "Not well at first," she said. "Eventually." I closed my eyes and tipped my head back and felt the sea air on my face. "He's in therapy," I said. "He called me last week. We're talking. Slowly." "I'm glad," Harriet said. "And Rosa, what about us? Is there room for us to still be family? You and me?" I thought about Gerald, about the visits Harriet and I used to share before everything got so crowded and complicated, about the Christmases and the birthdays and the easy, unpretentious warmth of a sister-in-law who had always fundamentally liked me, even if she had not always been brave enough to show it. "Yes," I said, "there's room for that. Come visit, come and see what I've built." She came the following weekend. We walked on the beach and had lunch at the cafe on the boardwalk, and she cried a little when she saw the framed letter from Gerald in my bedroom. We sat with that together for a while, the two of us, missing the same person from different angles. "He would have loved this house," she said. "He would have loved any house that was mine and free," I said. She nodded. "He always knew that about you, long before you did." 4 months in, something happened that I want to tell you about carefully, because it was unexpected in the best possible way. I was at the market on a Saturday morning, the good early market with the fresh fish and the local vegetables, and the woman who sells handmade preserves from a table at the end. I had my basket, and I was moving through the stalls at the particular unhurried pace that I had finally learned to adopt. when I heard someone call my name. Not Rosa, Rosalind. I turned and saw a woman about my age, white-haired and bright-eyed, wearing a blue coat and carrying a large canvas bag, and looking at me with an expression of genuine surprised delight. "Rosalind Vale," she said, using my maiden name. "It is you, isn't it?" I looked at her, and then across the distance of 40 years, I recognized her. "Constance Beaumont," I said. She came forward and we embraced the way you embrace someone you have not seen in 4 decades, but who once knew you in a way that very few people ever do. Constance and I had been friends in the years before Gerald, in our early 20s, when I was working my first accounting job in a small town 300 miles away, and she was working at the bookshop next door. We had spent 2 years in each other's company constantly, the kind of friendship built out of proximity and shared lunches and long conversations. And then life had moved us in different directions, and we had lost the thread. We stood in the middle of the market staring at each other. "What are you doing in Clearwater Cove?" she said. "I live here," I said. "I moved 4 months ago." "I live here," she said. "I have for 2 years." We both stood in the middle of the Saturday market in Clearwater Cove and laughed until several people turned to look at us. Constance had lived a full life since our 20s. 2 marriages, the first difficult and brief, the second long and loving and ended by loss. Children now grown, scattered about the country. A career in educational publishing that had taken her to various cities. And then, eventually, Clearwater Cove, a small house near the water. A quiet life she had chosen deliberately and loved genuinely. "Tell me everything," she said. "Come, I know a place. Come and tell me everything." We sat in the cafe on the boardwalk for 2 hours. I told her my story, the version I now knew how to tell without drowning in it. The version that moved through the difficulty and came out the other side into something clear and good. She listened the way Constance had always listened. Completely, without interrupting, with those bright eyes that took everything in. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "I knew you were a remarkable woman when you were 23, she said. "And I am sitting here, looking at you at 67 and thinking, she has finally gotten access to the version of herself she always was." I felt that land somewhere important. "How did you get to be so wise?" I said. "The same way everyone does," she said, "by living through things and paying attention." Constance joined our walking group within the week and folded into the circle of women in Clearwater Cove as naturally as if she had always been there. And something about having someone in my life who had known me before I became Nathan's mother, before I became Gerald's wife, before I became anyone's anything. Someone who knew Rosalind Vale from the years when I had been purely and entirely my own person. That felt like recovering a piece of myself I had not known I was missing. 6 months after I moved to Clearwater Cove, I did something I had thought about and delayed and thought about again for weeks. I drove back to Harlow City, not to the old house which belonged to someone else now, which was right and good and held no pull on me. I drove to Nathan and Vivian's apartment. I called ahead. Nathan said yes, immediately, and I could hear in his voice the particular quality of someone who's been waiting for something. I brought flowers, which I thought afterward was the kind of gesture that means more about the intention you arrive with than about the flowers themselves. Vivian answered the door. She looked different, less polished in a way that made her seem more real. She looked at the flowers and then at me and said, "Come in," in a voice that had lost its practiced brightness and was just ordinary and a little nervous. The apartment was small, but they had made it nice. There were plants on the windowsill, and a print on the wall I recognized as one Vivian had always liked. The kitchen smelled like something good was cooking. It looked like a home they were actually building, not just inhabiting. He stood up when I came in, the way he used to when he was a child and I came home from work, which was a gesture so instinctive that I do not think he even noticed he had done it. We sat down together. There was no script for this. There was no easy path through it. We were 3 people who had hurt each other and been hurt in complicated and overlapping ways, and were sitting together in a small apartment, trying to find out if there was something worth building on the other side of all that. Vivian spoke first, which surprised me. "I owe you an apology," she said, looking at her hands. "A real one, not an explanation, not a justification, Just an apology for the way I treated you in your own home, for the way I let Nathan treat you, for the things I wrote and almost sent." She looked up. "You were always kind to me even when I didn't make it easy, and I repaid that very poorly." I looked at her. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Do you believe me?" "I believe that you mean it now," I said. "Whether you meant it before, that's a question you have to answer for yourself." He had seen Gerald's steadiness as control, he said, and my accommodation as expectation, and he had replicated that in his own life without understanding what he was doing. "That doesn't excuse it," he said carefully. "No," I agreed, "but it helps me understand where it came from," he said. "And understanding where something comes from is how you stop it from happening again." We stayed for 3 hours. We had lunch, which Vivian had made, a simple pasta with good bread, and we talked about things that had nothing to do with the history between us. We talked about Cora's new research position. Nathan talked about a job he had applied for, something in logistics consulting, that would use the skills he had spent years developing, but had never properly deployed. Vivian told me she was considering training as a proper instructor, rather than part-time, building something that was actually hers. It was imperfect. There were moments of awkwardness, things that almost became arguments and didn't, things that were said carefully, where once they would have been said carelessly. But it was honest, and honesty, I have learned, is not the same as comfort. Sometimes it is quite uncomfortable, but it is real in a way that comfortable silence never is. When I left, Nathan walked me to my car. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I had to," I said. "You're still my son. That doesn't turn off." He looked at me with those eyes that still held something of the child I had raised. "Do you think we'll be okay? You and me." "I think we'll be different than we were," I said. "I think different can be better, if we both choose it." He nodded slowly. "I choose it," he said. "Then start choosing it every day," I said. "That's what choosing something actually means, not once, but every day." I drove back to Clearwater Cove in the long afternoon light, through the landscape that I had now driven enough times to know its rhythms. The particular stretch of road where the trees thinned, and you caught the first smell of salt water. The curve where the coast came into view and the gray-green of the sea appeared below the sky. Seasons changed in Clearwater Cove. The winter came, and the beach was swept clean and cold and beautiful in a different way. The light low and pale, the water dark. Frederica and Bea and Yolanda and I walked in our coats with scarves pulled up and our breath making small clouds in the early morning air, and talked about everything and nothing. Constance and I had dinner together twice a week and worked our way through the reading list we had never gotten to finish when we were 23. Delia and I had a standing Sunday lunch arrangement that we had not broken once. Thorne and Farrand bookkeeping services continued to grow in the steady, manageable way Louisa and I had agreed on from the beginning. We turned away 2 clients in the autumn because we had reached a number we were comfortable with and had agreed on that boundary up front and held to it without apology. That felt important. Cora came once a month. She was flourishing in her new research position, and I could see in her the particular glow of someone doing work that suits them completely. She brought the young man she was seeing, whose name was Marcus, on a visit in the spring, and he sat on the porch in the evening and talked with ease and genuine interest, and I could see why she liked him. Nathan called every week without fail. We had built something that was not what we had before, because what we had before had not been healthy on either side. What we were building now was slower and more deliberately constructed, and had honesty in its foundations in a way the old version never had. On a morning in March, 8 months after I had moved, I went to the kitchen and made coffee, and carried it to the porch and sat in the wooden chair and looked at the water. The morning was clear. The sea was pale blue and entirely still in the way it sometimes was before any wind arrived, like a mirror held up to the sky. The light was coming in low and gold across the water, the particular light of early spring that has warmth in it again after the winter. I had my notebook with me. I had been keeping it since the night after the dinner, adding to it irregularly. Not a journal exactly, more a record of observations and feelings, and the occasional thing I wanted to remember clearly. I opened it to a new page and I wrote, 8 months. Everything is different. Everything is mine. Then I wrote something else that had come to me in the night, lying in my bedroom with the ocean breathing outside the window and Gerald's letter in its frame on the wall. I spent 40-some years believing that love was a resource you had to manage carefully because there was only so much of it, and if you spent it on yourself, you were taking it from someone who needed it more. I raised my son on that belief. I ran my marriage on it. I ran my work and my home and every relationship I had on the assumption that I was the kind of person whose own needs came last in the queue. I want to say something now to whoever reads these pages after I am gone. That belief is a lie, not a malicious one, not one anyone taught deliberately, just the kind of lie that passes between generations of women without anyone stopping to examine it, because everyone around you is living by the same rules, and it looks like the only available reality. Love does not deplete when you direct it toward yourself. It expands. It becomes something you can give from a full place rather than a constantly diminishing one. I know this now. I know it in the way that I know the smell of this particular morning, which is to say, completely and with every part of myself. I chose myself, and in choosing myself, I became someone worth knowing, maybe even for my son, unquestionably for me. I closed the notebook. I drank my coffee. The sea was still doing nothing except being exactly what it was, steady and unhurried and indifferent to everything I had worried about for all those years. My phone vibrated on the table beside me. A message from Cora. Good morning from the city, Grandma Rosa. Having coffee and thinking about you and that porch of yours. The research is going brilliantly. Marcus says hello. I love you. I love you too. I put the phone down and looked at the water. Somewhere behind the cottage, the town of Clearwater Cove was waking up. The cafe would be opening. The market would be setting up. Constance would be walking her small dog along the path above the beach. Delia would be in her garden pulling up the last of the winter plants to make room for spring ones. Frederica and Bea and Yolanda would meet at the usual spot at 7 for their morning walk. My life, not arranged around anyone's needs but my own, was in motion. And it was full. And it was mine. To every woman listening to this story wherever you are, in whatever city, in whatever season of your own life, I want to ask you one thing. When was the last time you chose yourself the way Rosa chose herself? Not dramatically, not by burning anything down, but simply by deciding that your peace and your dignity and your right to your own life are not negotiable things. If this story found you tonight, it found you for a reason. Like this video so I know you are here, and subscribe so I can keep bringing stories like this one to you. And please, write your city in the comments. I genuinely want to see how far a woman's honest voice can travel. Every name, every city, every I was here matters to me, and to this community we are building together, because we are building it for each other, one true story at a time.